The Armstrong Whitworth AW-15 was conceived during the early 1930s and first flew on the 6th of June 1932. It was intended from the outset to replace the Armstrong Whitworth Argosy, which had been in service with Imperial Airways since the mid-1920s. With only 3 engines and a vast amount of built-in drag, the Argosy struggled to maintain altitude in the event of an engine failure, particularly so on the route to southern Africa, with its high ambient temperatures and aerodromes situated several thousand feet above sea level. The new aeroplane, designed a mere 7 years after the Argosy, took advantage of both wind tunnel technology and new methods of construction. The entire primary structure was made of alloy steel, formed into intricate girders and spars, and riveted together. Plywood and spruce were used for wing skins, ribs, fairings and formers, and all surfaces were covered in doped fabric. The 4 engines were Armstrong Siddeley servals, 340 horsepower, 10 cylinders, supercharged, with the inboards driving air compressors, the air being used for both starting the engines and for operation of the wheel brakes. Like another slightly tubby beauty of the era, the new Armstrong Whitworth had most of the undercarriage faired into the fuselage to minimise drag. As delivered, the aeroplane was fitted with very elegant spats. In service, these were generally removed and replaced with mudguards to prevent debris being thrown up into the engines and propellers. Imperial Airways was sufficiently impressed with the design that 8 were ordered unflown from the drawing board. First delivered was named Atalanta, which became the class name for all 8. However, it wasn't long before there was a spot of bother. In October 1932, the first aeroplane was being used by the manufacturer to test a new fuel tank vent. The fuel system was admirably simple, each pair of engines sharing a common leading-edge fuel tank nested between. Fuel flow to the carburetors and to a simple cross-feed system was provided by gravity. Unfortunately, shortly after takeoff from Armstrong Whitworth's own aerodrome at Whitley Abbey, Atalanta suffered a double engine failure and was badly damaged in the inevitable forced landing. The aeroplane was scheduled to attend a publicity event, and the organisers were expecting Atalanta, not something else. The simple solution was for the first aeroplane and the third aeroplane to swap names. All were named after females from Greek mythology, so Arethusa became Atalanta. The fate of the fuel tank vent designer is unrecorded. The Atalanta was well liked by its crew. A roomy cockpit sat two pilots side by side, with a wireless operator behind. The only criticism of note, made during certification, was that the rudder was overbalanced and too light in operation. Armstrong Whitworth's elegant solution was to reduce the size of the rudder horn and fit a servo tab to the trailing edge of the rudder. As designed, the Atalanta could carry up to 18 passengers, but the Imperial machines were primarily mail planes, the forward fuselage being configured for a freight compartment, and 9 passengers and a steward seated aft. In May 1933, Astraea was flown to Longreach in Queensland to be demonstrated to Qantas. In the event, Qantas didn't buy the Atalanta, but their managing director, Hudson Fysh, travelled on Astraea as far as Karachi and thence on the regular Imperial service to London. Fortunately for us, he kept an excellent log of the journey, which was published in Flight magazine. Incidentally, a few years ago I flew into Jodhpur to collect the Maharaja of Jamjar. The airfield looks little different other than a few taxiways and a hard runway. We might well have had the faster aeroplane, but Fysh and the Imperial crew had better hats. Qantas eventually bought the DH-86, a type not without its problems. A plan to build an uprated Atalanta, fitted with Jaguar or Panther engines, never left the drawing board. This was a great disappointment to Captain Roger Mollard of Imperial Airways, who wanted to enter an Atalanta in the 1934 Robertson Air Race from England to Australia. The Atalanta could never win outright, not against the modern airliners and the de Havilland Comet, not without a miracle anyway, but it might have done okay on handicap. Even with 4 engines, a combination of high weight, temperature and airfield elevation made the loss of one engine on takeoff a tricky proposition. Such fate befell Artemis at Petersburg in February 1936. Amazingly, no one was killed, and the aeroplane, whose construction method could be described as an outsized Meccano set sheathed in plywood, was returned to the manufacturer for rebuild. Artemis is seen here in 1938 at Lydda, now Ben Gurion Airport in Israel. The nose of Handley Page 42 Hadrian peers in from the right, looking somewhat appropriately like a friendly tortoise. The Taylor craft in the foreground was one of 3 machines, Lycoming 0145 powered, operated by the Palestine Flying Club. Atalanta, the second Atalanta, came a cropper at Kisumu when an engine failed shortly after takeoff. No one was seriously injured and the machine was soon repaired, but poor Amalthea wasn't so lucky. In July 1938, Amalthea crashed shortly after leaving Kisumu on a ferry flight from Nairobi to Alexandria. There were no survivors. With ever-increasing payloads and traffic, by the late 1930s, the Atalanta class had been surpassed by C-class flying boats, better known as Empire flying boats, on the route to southern Africa. However, the Atalanta continued in use on the Far Eastern route, and in 1939, the 5 machines still in service were transferred to the newly formed British Overseas Airways Corporation. In 1941, the Atalanta went to war. Heavily armed, the Atalanta was fitted with a single 303 machine gun to be operated by the Observer, and all 5 aeroplanes were used for troop carrying and coastal patrol until 1944, when the last was withdrawn.